We're back here at this iconic view of the Jordan Valley, the upper Jordan Valley with the kibbutzim, and we are traveling, we're going to be down here into the Jordan Valley and onto the area I'm pointing now, which is the southern Golan Heights. And if you can make out an antenna on the horizon, that is Kibbutz Mevo Hamma, which is the southernmost kibbutz on the Golan Heights. And from here, which is the iconic view of the Jordan Valley, we're going to go up there and view down over the ridge of the Golan Heights onto the most spectacular view in Israel. Here we have bikers, three. Okay. So if you come to Israel, this is one thing you can do. Today I'm up here in Kibbutz Mevo Hamma, which is the southernmost kibbutz on the Golan Heights, founded in 1968 at the older Turkish Hejaz railway station down below in El Hamma, the spa resort. And I'm talking to a guy, we've had contact via Facebook, but this is the first time we are actually sitting and talking together. And his name is David Coddington, and he's been here. How long have you been here in Mevo Hamma?
We came here in 1981, but before that we lived in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem for, since 1972.
Ah, so you and your wife Harriet, you were together as a family. So why did you come to Mevo Hamma?
You could ask why I came to Israel.
Okay, well, good. I'll ask that first. I mean, you know, tell me the story. What's the backdrop here?
After finishing an apprenticeship as a typesetter in England, I felt very restless and wanted to see the world, you know, like most kids do. So I one day I set off on my bike, went all over Europe.
Motorbike or bicycle?
No, bicycle. And went all over Europe, Scandinavia, ended up in Greece, and somebody said, you know, for an extra $20 you can go on the ferry to Israel. And so
you left from Piraeus?
Piraeus, yeah, on the ferry, which takes 3 days.
I know about that ferry. I did it in reverse.
Yeah,
big adventure.
I think it was $20 for the whole trip. And I had some addresses of people in Israel who, you know, on Kibbutz Yasor, which is near Akko.
Yes.
And I turned up there one day and I'd heard about volunteers on Kibbutz, and I thought, oh, this will be great for a few months. And I ended up, you know, on the first day I thought, wow, Israel's a fantastic place. There was like
what year was that?
1971.
I see. During the heyday decade of volunteers.
Yeah.
And 1967,
and when Israel was popular.
Yes, before we got into the present position.
Yeah.
And actually it's now June the 1st, 2023. Four. I wish. I mean, I don't know what day it is. I mean, you know,
it's all right.
I'm so busy with different things. Anyway, so you were both volunteers in Kibbutz Yasor?
No, my future wife came with an American Habonim group.
The youth movement from America. Yes.
Their mother sent them there in the hope that they would meet a nice
Jewish
Israeli boy, you know, like preferably an Air Force pilot. And,
so I assume that you're a nice Jewish boy.
Now I am.
Oh,
but then I wasn't.
You mean you underwent the cut?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
In 1970, was it 78, 79? I converted. And I'm still in touch with the rabbi who converted me, an American guy.
Interesting, because, you know, I found your name as David Coddington. I assumed
Who's your rabbi?
you're not a Jewish boy.
Yeah.
Okay, but now you're a Jewish boy. It could start a
so.
whole new lineage of
some-
Jewish Coddingtons.
Some people might disagree, but screw them.
I see. So you were there together with Harriet.
yeah.
How long did you stay there?
She left after 3-4 weeks to go back to the States, and we said we have to keep in touch. So after 6 months, she managed to get me a visa to go over to the States for 6 months, on the pretense that we'd get married within that 6 months. But then Nixon was president, so promises didn't mean much.
I see.
And so then her mother, her father had died a year before we met, so her mother and her daughter and son decided to make Aliyah to Israel, and after 6 months I followed.
I see.
And she went to the university in Tel Aviv and did a BA, and I worked at all sorts of jobs, like in the drive-in cinema. I worked slinging hamburgers.
Okay.
I worked as a gardener's assistant, 3rd class, in Tel Aviv, in Beit Brodetsky.
You were the one who dug the holes.
Yeah, and the boss watched me.
Yeah.
And then after that, I decided I wanted to work in graphics. I sort of bluffed my way into. I studied graphics and typography at Sheffield College of Art, so I wanted to get into.
And in those days when you studied, was it using computers then?
There was no such thing as computers. It was rubber cement and and knives and
because
and,
this is
Metroset.
very similar to me. As a young boy, I was quite talented painting, and at the age of 12, I wanted to become a graphic artist.
Yeah.
They didn't call them graphic artists in those days. They called them something else. I forget. But my mother, in all of her wisdom, said there's no money in advertising.
Yeah. I beg to differ.
And she set me on a course to become an architect. Well, I lasted in the College of Building for 4 months.
Yeah. No, if you, I often see myself as probably one of the oldest graphic designers still working in Israel.
Well, this is another point of similarity. I am one of a handful of the oldest YouTubers.
Oh yeah.
Probably the oldest YouTuber to start at the age of 77 and 78. Okay, we're finding common ground here.
Kudos. Okay. You want to ask any questions?
Okay, well, how did you get to Mevo Hamma?
We, after being in Israel for a few years, I decided I wanted to try and work with the big boys in England, in advertising, and so we decided to go back. My wife was pregnant with my son, so we moved back to Newcastle upon Tyne. I think she was in the 9th month of pregnancy, and we bought a house there in Newcastle, and I worked at a variety of places, jobs which I hated. Like I worked for Procter and Gamble, designing the packs for soap powder.
Okay.
Which was and after 2 years there, we hated England. Apologies to any Englishmen who were looking, but it just seemed like a dead
I won't take this personally, but Harriet, as an American, she didn't like England?
In theory she did, but she found there was sort of under the surface anti-Semitism.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which
and you were in Newcastle on Tyne.
Yeah.
Were you part of the Reform community there?
Yeah. Which is where
I have my cousins there.
We missed the vibe of Israel. I don't have to explain to you. There's only 2 countries in the world worth living in. One is America, and one is Israel, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you know, this may come as news to many people viewing this channel.
Yeah. Okay.
There's only 2 countries in the world. Okay.
And we came back to it. Before we went, we made contact through the Jewish agency with a guy called Ivor Golka.
I know the name.
I don't know whether he's still alive.
No idea.
Yeah.
So he was an envoy for the Jewish agency.
Yeah. And he gave us a couple of suggestions. One was down near Eilat, and the other one was
Lotan, Yahel. Okay, never mind.
And the other one was Mevo Hamma. So we thought, the Golan Heights sounds nice. It's nice and green. It's high up. So he put us in touch with Gary and Elaine Black,
okay,
who were in Manchester as Shlichim envoys.
Well, Gary and I were part of the same outgoing team of envoys.
Oh, okay.
He was in Manchester for Habonim,
Yeah.
and I was the National Reform Shaliach.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and they said that they would come over to talk with us one Saturday, and of course that Saturday coincided with a huge snowstorm over the Pennines. Yeah, so they couldn't make it.
I have to stop here and tell you something very quickly. I also, in 1970, 69, 70, had the choice of coming to Mevo Hamma, but I didn't want to come up onto the Golan Heights. Nothing to do with ideology. I just thought that the Golan Heights for me was very much like the Yorkshire moors.
That's why. Exactly, in winter it looks exactly like Ilkley Moor.
Ilkley Moor Batat.
Yeah, and so and we talked with Elaine on the phone, and she tried to describe Mevo Hamma. She said, we have alligators.
Alligators on the Golan Heights?
Yeah, alligator. No, she didn't say what. She said, Mevo Hamma has alligators. So I had this image of like alligators running in between the houses. And it was only after we got here we found that there were 10 kilometres down the road.
Down in the Yarmouth Valley, which is the spa resort, they've expanded it to hotels and petting animals and breeding alligators and various other things, a zoo and so on and so forth.
Actually, the breeding like the climate here wasn't conducive. They couldn't get any lead in the pencil.
So they are still down there as single guys and dolls. It's finished.
No, they sold them to a guy in Portugal. And
I see.
Actually, my son was the one who had to accompany the shipments from Israel to Portugal.
I see.
And the interesting story with this, on the land, he did 5 or 6 shipments with, on the boat and then onto a truck. And on the last shipment, they were opening the last case, and the alligator sort of turned round and bit him between the hand.
My goodness.
And he has to this day stitches here from.
Interesting. I'm just wondering, how do you insure alligators on such a long trip? Or how do you feed them? Do you throw them surplus sailors or what? Or
they go into a a coma, basically. You put them in a box.
I see.
I think you put a towel over the head, and they basically go to sleep. And
better than some fellow passengers.
And as I say, we arrived in Israel, and we tried to call the kibbutz to get someone to pick us up. And we had a 1-year-old baby.
What year was that?
1981, May.
Okay.
It was the time of the Syrian missile crisis up here. And
Syrian or Iraqi? No,
I think it was the Syrian.
Syrians.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and so we called the kibbutz, which took us like half the day to call, because there was in those days there was 2 telephones on the kibbutz.
2 public telephones.
There was one in the Maskirut, the office, and one in the dining room. Finally somebody answered the phone, and they said, we're we're here to come to Mevo Hamma. And they said, never heard of you. And they said,
try another kibbutz.
Yeah. And they said, for all that, can you hang around in Tel Aviv for 3 days till someone is someone can come and pick you up. And we said, no, we've got a baby and this,
Yeah.
that and the other. So in the end, we took a taxi all the way up
Wow.
to Temak, which is down in the Jordan Valley. And he said, I'm not going up to the Golan Heights because there's missiles falling. And so we offered to pay him twice the money. He said, for 3 times the money, I'll take you up to Mevo Hamma.
So did you come up on the old Syrian road or the new road via Ingev?
No, the old Syrian road, which on the day we came, the whole place was on fire, grass fires.
And it's the worst, it's probably the most dangerous road in Israel with, how do you call it, hairpin bends.
Yeah, actually that road was on Top Gear, you know, the Jeremy Clarkson show.
Yeah.
They featured one part where they did a Christmas special, and him and, you know, was it David May? Who was the other guy?
Can't remember.
Yeah, like they drove up in this old sports car up the road. They're saying, "Oh, this is the best road I've ever been on. Yeah, I want to marry it and have its children."
We've just come up on that road, but since that time it's been widened and resurfaced. Yeah. But it's still a heck of a dangerous road.
Yeah. Try cycling down it.
Yeah, and I've been up and down on it in the 70s on a tractor and a trailer. Yeah, you know. So you came up here. Now, obviously, you announced in advance you were coming. So were you accepted here as candidate members or what?
Yeah, as candidates. I think it was a year's candidacy. And the first thing the secretary of the kibbutz asked me, he said, "Are you interested in football?" I said, "No, I hate football." He said, "You aren't going to be here long."
Another common ground.
Yeah. So I thought, okay. So, we got here, we got a tiny little house, and the first day's work, they put me down in the bananas, which is like, it's a sort of version of hell.
For you, for me and Gary, it was wonderful.
Yeah. So but I hated it. With snakes and spiders and crazy men with machetes.
Oh yeah.
And I think I lasted there a week.
Lop them off while they're still young.
Yeah. It was like Heart of Darkness. And,
so how long did you last in the bananas?
About a week, I think.
I said, well, that's not bad going.
Yeah. And after that, they put me down in Hamad Gader.
In the tourist site.
Yeah, working in the gardens. And
by that time it was already a tourist site, because originally, until Pam developed it, it was an abandoned zone and a closed military area.
Yeah. So I had the job of chopping down weeds near the old mosque. There's an old mosque down there. And I was working and the sweat was pouring off me. And it got to about 5:30, 6. I noticed there was no one there. So I went to the office and no one there. Turns out they'd left me at the bottom there. Everyone had gone home.
And the barrier was down, probably, or whatever. I can't remember.
But I remember
you had no transport.
I had to walk up.
So what rise? I mean, down below there, it's about 200 meters below sea. No, maybe more, less rather, because it rises up from the Jordan Valley. And what's the height of Mevo Hamma?
Was it 350? I think.
Okay.
350 above sea level, I think.
So you had a hell of a long schlep.
Yeah.
In the heat. I know it was already cooling, but still,
Actually, I did that walk up twice. Once when I was in basic training in the army.
Yeah.
I got let out late because there's some piece of equipment missing, and this was in Gush Etzion, which is near Jerusalem.
On the West Bank.
I arrived in Tiberias at like 7 o'clock in the evening, and I managed to catch a taxi down to the bottom. Of course, there's nothing. There's nothing going up, so I ended up having to walk home. And
so it probably took you about 2 hours, maybe
2 hours plus, and I had to go back the next day to the army.
I see.
The end of the next day, so I basically crashed, woke up again, went back to the army.
So after the bananas, what happened?
There was Hamad Gader. then they put me in the working in the fields, which also is not for me.
I see.
Like
Okay.
I don't like work, basically.
You know, work is an interesting thing. I mean, the best job I've ever had is being a pensioner. The hours are fantastic. The salary isn't so good.
Yeah, the salary is not so good, but and yes, I've lost the. What were you
Okay,
asking me?
so after you were in the fields,
Yeah. I lasted about a week there because I had to put.
you must have
pipes
made
together.
such a tremendously good impression on the rest of
I
the
think I did,
kibbutz.
yeah. Which brings me to another thing. Like most kibbutzim people come with a garin, like
Yes.
a group,
Yeah,
which I presume you
settlement
did,
group.
yeah. And in which case you sort of you have something to fall back on. Even if you're the world's most horrible person, like you're not going to get kicked off or anything. But we came just a couple from out of the blue, and it's a lot harder to get accepted. I think it took us a lot longer than if we'd come with a garin.
But even so, Harriet, coming from the Habonim youth movement, surely she...
The US Habonim movement doesn't count for anything here.
It's a British group.
The British group, yeah.
Okay, and the Australians.
Australians, yeah. And,
So, how did you find your own corner in the kibbutz, work-wise and socially?
yeah. After the working in the fields, I worked in the electronics factory for about a year, and I had this. I was checking out things about graphic design in the north of Israel, and it seemed like there was no graphic design studios. So one day I went to the office, to the secretary of the kibbutz, and I said, "Look, there could be a business opportunity here." Yeah, and I said, it's barely any. We don't have to put much money into it, and I would be good at doing it. So he said, "Fine, yeah, buy the equipment you need," and I set up a small studio in the electronics factory. And slowly, I managed to get a few clients, and it was great. I was happy.
Now this is interesting because the early 80s was the start of the big economic crisis in the kibbutz movement. How did it
all over
affect
the country.
Mevo Hamma? And you say that somehow you managed to get your business going.
Yeah. And,
So what was Mevo Hamma in a position of belt tightening and closing down things?
Everywhere in the country there was 400% inflation in the mid 80s, and any way to make money, without having to put a lot of money in, it was, it's a win-win situation. Right?
Well, it could be. I mean, I was out with Gary from 84 to 86. I came back to a place in my kibbutz where they're all crying.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, they didn't allow me to do my business effort. But that's for another time.
I was maybe, because I was a desperate case.
Yeah, me too.
And then after a year of doing that, I got conscription papers to go into the army. And
how long did you go in for?
I did 3 months basic training. It's what's called Shlav Bet for people who are older. Yeah.
And they consider not so physically.
Yeah. And this was in the time of the first Intifada, I think it was, and did.
And then,
time in the,
what unit were you in?
I was in combat engineers, Handa Sakravit. Blowing up things and
so you had
laying
fun.
mines. Oh yeah.
Guy Fawkes night every day.
More or less, yeah. And then after I came back, the kibbutz was looking for after I came back from the army, the kibbutz started looking for a new industry. There was all sorts of options, either to go into food or this or that. And in the end, they chose a polypropylene plastics factory, making stationery products. And of course, they needed a designer. And, it's a ready-made designer. So they built this wonderful factory, all the perfect studio, northern light, and fancy drawing boards and the whole thing. And basically, it was hard to break into the market because there was a mental block in the world against plastics. People thought that plastics were bad for the ecology.
Yes,
So
okay.
it took a few years to persuade the world that it wasn't, and we came up with a lot of great products which we sold all over the world. And the factory never really made a huge profit, but
it provided places of
Right,
employment,
yeah,
and you didn't have to drive 2 hours to work.
that's true.
You know.
At the same time I was working in the factory, though, I wanted to keep my freelance business open. So I worked as an art director for a television advertising agency, which I used to go twice a week. I would catch the bus at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Now you've reminded me of what originally was called, nowadays it's a graphic artist, it was called a commercial artist.
Commercial artist, right,
Yeah.
And so I was like burning the candle at both ends. I was waking up at 2 days a week. I was waking up at 4 o'clock. The guy in charge of the car say wouldn't give me a car because he said I wasn't.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I would hitch down to the valley, catch the bus to Tel Aviv, work art directing till about 3-4 o'clock, rush to catch the bus back to the north, get back home at 10:30, 11 o'clock.
So you were putting in all of this time and effort
Yeah.
to move yourself forward in a new profession, and yet, let me assume, all of the money was going to the kibbutz and not into your private bank account.
Exactly, yeah.
So
there's a word called a fryer, which is somebody who is
a mug.
a mug. And for years I was a mug. And then,
Interesting.
And then a few years later, most of the kibbutzim went into what's called hafrata. How do you say hafrata?
Well, they call it privatization, but it isn't a complete privatization. It's a salarization into differential salaries. And the privatization in stages came with other kibbutzim when common assets were in fact privatized.
Yeah. It was a painful process for some people, but like it's natural.
I was one of the renegades in my kibbutz.
As I always say, socialism is fine when you're 20, but when you're 50, it's ridiculous.
That's right.
I
So
don't know whether you agree with me or not.
I completely agree with you, but the average age of my kibbutz was 57 when we eventually made the change.
Wow.
For me, it was the difference between day and night previously. So how did the change affect you personally as a professional with your family? How did you feel? You said you were working like mad in doubling up on jobs before that.
Yeah.
What happened after you made the change?
We suddenly had a lot more money. We
right.
could afford a car, we could go to Kibbutz every year.
You go abroad.
You have to go abroad every year. And
So suddenly you were a made man.
Yeah. And in those days I was probably making more money than anyone else on the kibbutz. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife went out to got a teaching degree, and then she worked for writing.
Hold on a second, let me just call out. Natalie, hi! I'm here with David.
I'm being interviewed, grilled.
Hello.
We're being interviewed. I'll come to you afterwards if you're at home.
I'm saying mostly good things about all of you.
Okay, so let's carry on. So we were talking about all of the benefits that you had after you made the change to salarization. Have you gone as far as privatization here, for example, communal assets being spread out in terms of money?
We've started getting dividends the last few years.
Okay.
Yeah, and the factory is now making money, the plastics factory, because the Chinese cut our legs out on the product market. Like
many
yeah,
industries.
they would take one of our products and do it, you know, like one to one, and even call it the same trade name.
Well,
Flick.
with the more complicated engineering, they did reverse engineering and flooded the market with all copies and fakes and others.
Yeah. So now the factory is producing just polypropylene sheets, which they sell to people who want to make products.
I see. Well, that brings us on to the point I mentioned earlier, that the factory provided a workplace for members of the kibbutz. About how many people from the kibbutz work in the factory nowadays?
Now, I would say there's maybe half a dozen at most.
Okay. What's the total membership of Mevo Hamma now about?
I think is it 450?
I see.
I think so.
And do you have vacant buildings to take in newcomers or what?
There are a few years ago they built a neighbourhood, a private neighbourhood, which is part of Mevo Hamma, but the people who live there aren't kibbutz members.
I see. So in fact, you have two communities side by side.
Three now. There's another one they built in the south, which is for people who are like you pay a certain amount of money to become a member, and you can also build your own house.
You buy into the kibbutz, build your own house. Okay, so you have three communities. You have the older established one, the newer one with members. Is there any conflict of interest between the people who are not members of the kibbutz and kibbutz members?
Small ones, like there was an issue a while ago about people renting out their houses as Airbnbs, and it was annoying some of the neighbours, so it became a big issue. And finally, I think they sorted it out by, saying like it's not in the regulations to have an Airbnb, but basically everyone gets along. Like we have friends in the new neighbourhood.
So when you say 400, 450, that's the three different groups?
I have no idea. I think I think there's 400 members. The people who live there is probably a couple of hundred. I haven't got the figures at hand.
Okay, so where do all these people work?
A lot of people work in high-tech stuff,
So working
like
from home, Soho.
Like I work for people in the States who I've never even met. It's all email and Zoom. And it's where do other people work?
Well, how many people work out on the farm? Very few.
Very few. They're mostly Thailandian. How do you say?
Thai workers.
Yeah.
And what happened? And that brings us now to the current position. What has happened here with the Thai workers? We are now at the end of the 8th month of our war against Hamas, and here you are right on the Syrian border. What's the situation with the war here? Thai workers.
As far as I know, the Thai workers are working. They didn't leave Mevo Hamma, as far as I know. Like some in the south, left as soon as the war started. But our corner is footful, very
touch wood,
touch wood, very quiet, and we've basically had 2 alarms in the last 8 months.
I see.
Which both have been shot down by the Iron Dome.
I see. So in fact, any missile, so you're within rocket range, both from Syria, from Iraq, but moreover with regards to the war.
From Lebanon. Syria is an invalid state. I don't think they can do much.
No.
Hopefully.
Well, has the Lebanese threat, even though it's not been so active because we're on the southern Golan Heights, as you know, there are 70,000, 80,000 evacuees from the Lebanese border, Israeli settlements. Has it in any way affected, for example, do you have any tourist facility here or anything?
There's just Hamad Gader, which was closed for 6 months. It finally opened up.
I see.
It didn't affect us financially very much.
Hamad Gader, as the spa resort, is owned by Mevo Hamma, Kibbutz Kfar Haruf, and Kibbutz Afik.
Afik, and I'm not sure where the mates are. No, they turned into a moshav.
I
So
see.
it's the three kibbutzim own it. And I think it opened up about 6 weeks, 2 months ago.
Okay.
But further north, the tourism is like a lot of places have been affected.
Yeah.
A lot of the wineries have been affected. The how do you say tzimmerim?
The B&Bs.
The B&Bs is a big tragedy.
You've forgotten your English. You've been here too long.
That's it. Yeah.
You know, viewers, we talk in a mixture of sort of Hebrew vocabulary thrown into an English sentence.
Yeah, it's called Heblish.
English or what is it? Pinglish or Hebrew? I forget what they call it.
Heblish.
Heblish. So we'll stop speaking Heblish. You know, people ask me, you know, what languages I speak. I tell them I speak three. Three? Yeah, I speak English, I speak Scouse, and I speak rubbish. All right, well, that's it. That's unless. Are there any questions you want to ask me? I don't mind. I'm all for transparency.
Yeah. Can't really think of any.
No, okay, good.
No, it's.
Okay, so folks, we're finishing off here. So here we are outside of the kibbutz, and this is what David is all about. He's been cycling for years. How long have you been cycling for?
I started when I was 14 years old. I joined a cycling club in Doncaster, and ever since then it's become like a drug.
A drug. And you told me you've written a book about it. Hard copy, e-book, what?
Yes, it's an e-book I wrote 3 years ago. It was basically about growing up in Yorkshire in the 1950s and up to my teenage years, and then on to travelling through Europe by bicycle, coming to Israel, and you know, basically my life story.
So are you part of any cycling organisation club here in Israel?
No, I just go out every day.
And the Golan Heights, I mean, I'll just film here, it's bad visibility. It's basically a slightly sloping plateau with flat land all the way around.
It's a slight incline. It goes all the way up to Mount Hermon, which is the highest mountain in Israel.
Which is that way.
Yeah.
And
over that way.
After we finish cycling, we're going to come back into the kibbutz, and we'll go to the precipice on the western side, and I'll show everybody on YouTube the most spectacular view in Israel. So David, how far do you usually pedal?
What?
How far do you usually cycle for?
25, 30 kilometres a day.
Wow, you're fit.
I don't even feel it anymore.
I see. That's behind you, and on your right, that's already the Syrian border. I see. How far away from here?
3 or 4 kilometres.
I see. So David, what would you tell the viewers about cycling on the Golan Heights?
One, the roads there's barely any traffic most of the day. There's more than there used to be 40 years ago, but it's still great cycling country.
I see.
Big sky country.
Okay, well there we are, and if I pan around here behind us, I'm now looking to the west, and the ridge in the skyline that's already on the Lebanese border. Yeah. Okay, David, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure talking to you, sir.
All the best.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Nice to have met
Yeah,
you.
okay.
So, the reason I brought you here to Mevo Hamma, apart from talking with David, is that this is a kibbutz with the most spectacular view in Israel. We're on the western edge of the precipice of the Golan Heights, and if we just look around here, down below us is the Sea of Galilee, hundreds of meters below us. In the distance, the round mountain over there is the Mount Tabor outside of Afula. Across the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, there is the town of Tiberias. Panning around, we see the whole of the lake here, the mountain skyline there, that's already Lebanon. Here is a closer view down below us. That's the southern side of the lake and the crossroads of Tzemach. Panning around over to Tiberias there. Before I go, I want to tell you about David's e-book called Freewheeling. He published it on Amazon 3 years ago. He describes growing up in the 1950s in Doncaster in northern England. At one stage, he decided to see the world on his bike. As he told me, and in his own words, he's a biking junkie. Nowadays, he cycles on the Golan Heights every day for between 25 and 30 kilometers. So as a guy in his mid-70s, he keeps fit and active. His book, Freewheeling, describes his adventures and lucky escapes of a lad growing up on the English council estate who broke free. He was looking for love and adventure. In the early 1970s, he crossed Europe, took a boat from Greece and arrived in Israel. I can tell you something about David. My contact with him started on Facebook. I saw his posts and commented. He has a sharp sense of humour, which is sometimes sarcastic. He has a typically English dry wit and knows how to write. According to the Amazon promo, he tells hilarious tales of people he met on the roads in 3 continents. He also gives vivid descriptions of life in Israel in the 1970s. So, go ahead and check it out. And one last thing, make sure you subscribe to this channel. My next video was filmed during last March at the other end of Israel in Kibbutz Elifaz near Eilat. That's probably about 300 kilometers from Mevo Hamma on the Golan Heights. Also, I would like to apologize for the long break between videos as I had a problem with my video editing app. I'm working on that issue now to get a better handle on this new video editor. So, keep well, keep fit, shalom and lehitraot.